Here's a statistic, and you can roll with it. They produce, and the government will produce, an 80% survival rate for pediatric cancer.
Mhm.
What that really means is that you will survive for at least 5 years because you are guaranteed, or you are cancer-free after 5 years of clear scans. So that means 80% will survive at least 5 years. After that 5 years, the timer starts over. Therefore, that number doesn't get screwed with. It always looks really good at 80%. It's bullshit. I
Yep.
love the fact that we have great researchers, and I love that we have great scientists and doctors. I found a doctor in New York that is studying the specific type of cancer that our daughter had. He got a
Amazing.
grant from the government to continue his studies. He is one of only, I believe, 2 or 3 that I have found in the country that are studying this disease at that level. That's us. That's us as advocates. And again, I'm not doing it for accolades. That's us as advocates, because I will find those studies and pass those along. And hopefully one day that type of cancer and every type of pediatric cancer is under control and we can treat it properly, or we can catch it earlier. Getting scans or getting CT scans, I have personally believe, and everybody can think how they want, that an annual CT or an annual MRI should be something that's allowable on your insurance for your child. You don't have to use it. It's a benefit. If every single year when your child goes in for their annual exam, okay, this year you're able to have your annual CT or your annual MRI, would you like to do it? Yes or no? Listen, if we'd have caught it sooner, maybe it would have made a difference. Maybe it wouldn't have. But we'll never know, because that was never an option to us until it was months and months later of being told your daughter, who has brain cancer, is constipated. That was our diagnosis for months and months and months. The child was on enough laxatives. I don't know how she was walking straight. Laxatives to fix constipation, to later find out all of her symptoms lined up with choroid plexus carcinoma, an extremely rare form of brain cancer. And here we are today.
We got the same diagnosis from the pediatrician, constipation. So I definitely relate to that one. And I always, because, William was born 2019. So then COVID happened, about 6 months. He was 6 months old when COVID happened, I think. So I had already gone to the pediatrician originally. So I exclusively pumped for Willie, and he was spitting up bottles like left and right. And I was like, what is happening? I was like, this is not normal. Like, Edward never did this. And it was Steven's first baby. And he was like, is that supposed to happen? I was like, no. So I took him to the pediatrician. They said he just has acid reflux. Set him up. And I was like, okay. I mean, I had acid reflux as a baby. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just sit him up and feed him bottles. And it was horribly exhausting, but I did it. And then he turned 1 year old. We transitioned to whole milk. He still got my pumped milk from that I saved in the freezer for him till he was 2. But then he started getting constipated, and I was like, this is weird. My husband took him to the pediatrician. He was like, he's constipated. And she was like, maybe he's lactose intolerant. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, when you're lactose intolerant, like, regular milk makes you sick. It gives you diarrhea. Like, why would you be constipated? A year of enemas and laxatives and everything I could think of. And then he developed that lump, and I took him back to the pediatrician, and we found out. But I asked the oncologist, I was like, what if we caught it sooner? Because if you catch hepatoblastoma before it metastasizes, the survival rate is so much better. She looked at me straight in the eye. She's a very blunt lady, and I loved her. She was like, I mean, the survival rate would have gone up significantly, and you would have had less chemo. We could have done a transplant. All these other options that we didn't have because he was stage 4, and it metastasized to both lungs, not just one. She was like, but I mean, most pediatricians don't know what to look for. And I was like, I guarantee ours knows now.
Right.
And I mean, we shouldn't have to do that either. I feel like they should be trained in that.
Yeah. I know our pediatrician, when the diagnosis came through, she called us and apologized for not catching it. But the reality of the situation is that all the symptoms that we were shown, they lined up perfectly with this type of cancer, 100%. You pull up this, and she had all the symptoms of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not looking for that, right? They're looking for the easiest treat them and street them idea. And that sounds really crude, but that's what they're doing. And to an extent, I understand that. I do. You don't want to come in and have a kid that can't take a shit. You're like, okay, you've got cancer. But we need to really look at all the avenues of what it could be
Mhm.
and give you those options. And that a lot of that stuff is just really left out. And that's part of where we are. And that's I hope that early detection, I know that they pump for early detection when it comes to breast cancer, prostate cancer, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Like we're supposed to be getting annual exams or whatever at a certain age anyway for that type of stuff, because early detection is key to being able to treat it at a better rate. Now, you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about. Now, we had a very close friend of ours. Her daughter passed from fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma, so liver cancer as well. And she was always told that if transplant was not a possibility because this type of cancer would just keep coming back. It would be kind of recurring no matter what. Was hepatoblastoma, is that the same way, or would a transplant solved it essentially?
So, from what they told me, a transplant would have solved it if it had not metastasized. Because his cancer metastasized, he was not eligible for any transplant. And I don't know if he ever would be unless it returned in his liver.
Okay. And that makes sense. That makes sense. The metastasization happens so fast, and when it does, try to slow it down. Honestly, it's that happens the same way with, say like Ewing sarcoma, and it just once it starts to spread, and it spreads fast. The same thing, obviously with our daughter, it was leptomeningeal disease, and once it started to spread without the brain and then into your spine and your CNS, it's like washing your body with cancer cells, and there's not a whole lot that can be done. So again, this just kind of leads into the early detection and that early possibility of something happening, or the testing that could be done while all these things are happening, where you could test for early types of cancers and things like that. And yes, maybe it means more invasive procedures for children. Maybe it means one more shot or one more, biopsy of certain things when they're very young. And I know it's traumatic, but it's way more traumatic if something happens later on in life like this. And if we could prevent it, that would be incredible.
I agree. I wish we could do more. I mean, that's one thing I've always worried about. With our other son is I'm like always looking for signs and symptoms. I'm always preaching to people about signs and symptoms. And they're like, should I really just be worried about a lump? And I'm like, yes, lumps, bumps, bruises, unexplained, you need to be worried about immediately. And they're like, but what if my pediatrician brushes it off? And I'm like, then go to the hospital, because you would rather spend your copay at the hospital for them to say it's nothing than for you to go to the hospital and sit there for a week because your kid just got diagnosed with cancer and you have to be admitted for chemo, and you're just jumped into this world where you don't have any idea what to do. You have no one to turn to. You'd rather them say it's nothing than, hey, it's cancer. Here's what we need to do.
Yeah, if you can get ahead of it, yeah, it is definitely one of those things where if you can do it early and you can find out things, spend your day, spend some time, whatever, figuring it out. You know, I'm one of those, like, listen, I was born in the 80s and 90s kid. We were bruised all the time, right? If you weren't doing something dumb, you weren't doing something right. And, we raised in a time when you put rub some dirt on it, brushed it off and walked it off. And that was part of my I mean, my wife is only a year younger than me, but that's part of my terrible mindset with the whole thing, was that I refused to believe that it was something more serious than it was, because the symptoms were so weird. With brain can't A lot of it, you feel sick in the morning and then you feel great the rest of the day. So it was an odd set of symptoms. And so for that was put a mental block on me to say, what is really going on? That is, you're only sick during the time you want to go to school. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
little stupid things like that. And so I look at it now and I look back and I say, yeah, I wish I would have been, different in the mindset, but I know that we did the best that we could for her. And I know that you're doing the best you can. And I know all these families are doing that same thing, but it's very easy to get in that mental block of, it can't be this, but it could be. And wouldn't you rather be sure that it's not?
exactly. Exactly. I remember, so my husband actually lost his father to cancer, before we met. And I looked at him, I think it was the night before we went to the pediatrician the first time, and I looked at him and I was like, what if it's cancer? And he was like, why would you say that? Because of course I'm a Googler. I shouldn't be. I should stop. But I was like, I Googled it. I Googled right upper quadrant abdominal lump. And literally the first thing that came up was cancer. And my husband was like, why would you Google that? It's not cancer. And unfortunately, even though I was a crying mess, the second he walked in the doors of the emergency room, I said, I told you it was cancer. And we laugh about it now. But I don't know. I just more people would take it seriously. Because I mean, I'm only 30. I just had my first colonoscopy because I'm at increased risk of colon cancer. And I mean, I can get my colonoscopy whenever I want. I was clean, so I get to go another 5 years. But I mean, there's nothing for kids. I mean, if Edward develops something, what if their kids develop something? Like, how are they going to know?
Right.
Besides me preaching at them. But
yeah, no, that's
there should be more.
There should be a lot more options. And again, it was the same thing. And this is one thing that I will tell you, that the reason that we can all relate is on a deeper level than just cancer itself, is because all of the symptoms and what leads up to the diagnosis are so damn similar. JC had, one day her eye just turned in when she would look at you. We got it looked at. She had a swollen optic nerve. As soon as that diagnosis of the swollen optic nerve came through, my wife was on it. And listen, I do the same damn thing. We're not supposed to, but we do. And she looked it up. The first thing that comes up with swollen optic nerve is a brain tumor. And I said, no. I said, that's not it. It's something else. It's not what it is. She was right. I was wrong. But I wish it was the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was. And as soon as that diagnosis came through, our pediatrician got on the phone with us and said, you need to get to Milwaukee right now. They know you're coming. Go to the ER. They're going to check you in. Whatever. CT scan at 10 o'clock at night shows a brain tumor. We're admitted for 12 days. At that point, 3 brain surgeries. At the end of that third brain surgery, she walked the hell out of the hospital. JC walked herself out. We thought, we've beat this thing. She came in, she went through it, she smiled, she laughed. We got out of it. Never, ever, ever take your foot off the gas. 100%. Don't do it. Because although we believed it, and she did for a long time, don't ever take your foot off the gas. And don't ever be afraid to ask questions to your doctors, to push at the ER, urgent cares, whatever. If you feel that something is wrong, you're the parent. You know your children better than any doctor ever will. I don't care how thick their file is. I have got 2 file boxes full of her stuff. I'm telling you, even with all that, you know your parent, or you know your child better than any person. You know their baselines, you know their ups and downs, you know when they're not right. Fight for anything. Don't be afraid. And if that doctor doesn't want to listen to you, you find another one. If that pediatrician blows you off, find another one. You find somebody that will listen to your concerns, listen to what you're saying, and take you seriously, but never stop.
I agree. I mean, I went with William to urgent care the weekend before he was diagnosed, and they took an x-ray of his belly. And I remember looking at the x-ray. Of course, I didn't want to say anything, right? Because it's urgent care. I look at the x-ray and I'm like, what is that big old thing in his belly? And they're like, oh, we can't tell you that. Just follow up with your regular pediatrician. And I'm like, which in hindsight, maybe it's a good thing, because our oncologist was absolutely phenomenal when we first walked in. And she handled me with the bluntness and the grace that I needed at that moment. But I said, why didn't they just send us to McLean's right then and there? You could see the mass on the x-ray. I saw it. Clear as day. And that was me without any anatomy and physiology training. He was like, well, maybe it was because a different doctor was on call that day. And he was like, and you probably wouldn't have vibed with them. Which he's probably right. And he was like, and maybe it's a blessing we got who we got. Because she was like an expert in the liver cancer. And she knew who to call. We went to Texas Children's for all of his surgeries with the best liver surgeon I've ever met in my life. And we had a great experience. And I know some people don't have the same stories with some of our oncologists. Well, they're not there anymore, but some of the oncologists up there. He was like, maybe we just needed her. And I was like, okay, well, I wish they would have sent us anyways, because what was that? You saw it. You're a doctor. You could have said something. Hey, I think that's a mass. Maybe go to the children's hospital and get it checked out.
Yeah, it is. It's it's an unfortunate side effect of this world, is that doctors in themselves are very territorial. They don't want to take on case. It's like a lawyer. They don't want to take on a case they can't win. Doctors don't want to take on cases they can't fix. And, I have, we've had good connections with some and bad connections with others. And the ones that just tell you how it is, much like some of the politicians that I've met, I respect the ones more that will tell me, hey, this idea sucks. This isn't going to work, than the ones that blow smoke, because I would rather you tell me that this is really bad. And, the first oncologist that we had, we didn't vibe with him. We didn't like him. And I don't know, it was just bedside manner and things like that. And it seemed like our daughter was more of a notch in the belt and a guinea pig to kind of say, I've treated this type of cancer, than it was, something positive. And I remember he sat right in front of us and said, all right, we got the diagnosis, it's choroid plexus carcinoma, and the prognosis is not very good. That was our words with him at that moment, sitting in a waiting room waiting for her to get out of her third surgery. And at that point, what do? We started getting mad at people that were coming up to the desk that were bitching about not being able to go see their mom that was, just in a bed somewhere. We're like, you know, whatever. Your kid wasn't just diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer, and she's 7 years old sitting in, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
we didn't think anything else in the world mattered. And to be honest with you, I don't think anything else was as significant as what we were going through. And that's what we felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to treat every time you're with your child in the doctor's office as with that same intensity. You're their only patient. You're the only one there at that moment. I don't care what you have going on in the room next to you. I don't care what your appointments and your schedule looks like. I don't care about your golf game. Right now, you're in
Exactly.
here with us. And if I want to keep you in this room for 2 hours, that's what I'm going to do. And that's advice I would always give to everybody. Don't be afraid to hold them down and make them answer every single one of your questions, because nothing is more important at that moment than the questions you have about your child.
Yep. I mean, our first oncologist, I think she spent 3 or 4 hours with us explaining. We signed him up for a clinical trial immediately. Explained the clinical trial, explained all the chemotherapies, explained all the side effects. Had us sign, a million pieces of paperwork because it was a clinical trial. Explained the whole process, answered any and all questions. I mean, I immediately messaged my best friend who was a microbiologist, and I said, tell me what I need to know about this. Tell me what questions I should ask. And he was like, I don't really know, but I would ask this, this, and this. And so I did. I asked all the questions, and she was so amazing. She said, but I am going to tell you, the tumor's big in his liver. It's big in his lung. In his right lung, it was really big too. She was like, the prognosis isn't good. She was like, but we've seen success with the clinical trial, so I want you to try this. She was like, I know it's scary. It's a clinical trial. She was like, but no kid gets like a placebo. They always get chemo. She was like, so I want you to try this, and we're just going to hope for the best. She was like, but I need you to prepare for the worst. And I was like, okay, well, I will. But can you tell my husband? And, we also, the nurse who was in the room with us when he got diagnosed, we're super close with her now. We still see her often, even at the hospital. But I mean, we go to the zoo with her. She loves Willie like her own baby. And I mean, she was in the room when we got re-diagnosed. And we've made lasting connections. I mean, I have our first oncologist's regular phone number. I have our oncologist now phone number. And so if I need anything, I'm immediately like, hey, I need this. And it's done. But I know people who don't have the same experience, which is crazy to me. But we've been very blessed, I think, with our children's hospital here anyway.
I think honestly that most experiences, at least from what I've heard, they're positive once you as the parent make the changes to your child's team that is best for them. I had at least one doctor that was on her team when we had to go there for a seizure that she had, that was no longer allowed in the room after day one, as well as a nurse that was there during her stem cell transplants, because their attitude sucked. And at that moment, you don't need that around that energy. So I said, no, you guys are no longer allowed around my child. You're not allowed to be in here. You chose the wrong career path, leave. But once you make that change to your child's team, your experience at the hospital and doctor visits, it can be very positive, even in this kind of a time. And especially when they're honest with you, when they let you know things are going on, and you can see that they really care about your child as a person and not just a number. I remember that, the day we were told that it was a relapse, that at this point we were still in masking phase. So everybody had masks on at that point. So for all a year, I didn't know what anybody's face looked below their nose. So at that point, when we told them that, our social worker came in, who I still talk to today. She's amazing. And this was the first time that I'd ever seen her just break down and not be able to really provide me with anything, because I said, I don't know what I need. And she broke down. That's how you can tell these kids mean something to these people. And when you get the right team, they're going to be there for you. Same thing. I've got phone numbers and email addresses and stuff, and we can still contact if we need questions or whatever. And those are real people. Those are people that don't think that they're so important that they couldn't possibly talk to you outside of office hours. And when you find that, hold on to it, and hold on to it even in, when your child is finished with treatment. If your child passes, hold on to that information. Have that support system that you can also pass on to other people. And that's an amazing asset and tool. And if you find it, say your prayers.
Exactly. I agree.
So I wanted to ask something else too. I know I ask a lot of families when I talk to them on here, and it's something that I mention, and then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I know what that is. The 80-20 rule with this community is very prevalent, and more people, and again, if I don't explain it, more people are in the 20% rule than they are in the 80% side. So what I'm talking about is that 80% of families, couples, will break up during a diagnosis like this. It's not because they fall out of love. It's not because of any of that. It's because the stress and everything that this can do to a family and a person's mental health and all that can really just divide and tear a family apart. So how did it affect, either positive or negative, your personal relationship with your husband? And were there ever, I'd talked to my wife about this, and she told me surprising things, but were there ever times that you thought that you would be part of the 80%?
Yeah, so actually we almost were a part of the 80%. So the first diagnosis was really tough on us. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed taking care of autistic kids. It was just my thing, and I had to leave abruptly, and immediately thrust into the world. And I was very much the sole caregiver. I did TPN 12 and 18 hours a day. I changed 1.5 million ostomy bags because he was 2, and an ileostomy bag is horrible with a 2-year-old. I did everything. The house, the dog, the kids, the hospital stays, everything. And my husband was having a really hard time with work. He is a correctional officer and not at an easy unit. And he was having a tough time with inmates and his anger, and it spiraled. And we talked about, I was like, I want a divorce. And he was like, then we'll divorce. And I was like, okay, cool. And that was in March. William was not, he was in remission at this point. That was in March of 2023. And we talked about it. And I was like, I don't know what to do yet. I wasn't back at work full time quite yet. I was like, but I'm done. This is too much. I can't handle it anymore. And he was like, okay. Somehow we made it through. I don't know what the click was. I don't know when we decided to try again, really. It was just kind of like, why are we doing this? We still love each other so much. And we have really put our relationship first. We try to date when we can. Even if it's at home, we'll watch a movie together. He's really good now about keeping his temper in check. His job is a little bit easier at work, so he's not so concerned. Even though he's our sole income provider right now, he's still super present at home with the kids, which was one of the things I complained about before. He helps around the house. He helps me study. And I take care of the kids and I go to school. That's all I do right now. And it's super, I don't know, we just found our way, but it wasn't easy. We fought so much the first time. We were fighting every day, to the point to where Edward was like, Mommy, are you and Daddy gonna fight today? And I just didn't want my kids to be around that. I have already been divorced for a reason. And I married Steven quickly. And, we had William quickly, and I've never been shy about admitting that. But the cancer diagnosis was a lot for us as We had only been married a year and a half when William was diagnosed. And it was just a lot. The whole year he was in treatment was really hard on us. And I mean, this time around, he stepped up. He showed up to the hospital anytime I needed him to. Anytime I called him at work, he immediately left. And we've just really tried to focus on solidifying our marriage so we can be better parents for our kid.
I think it lines up a lot with what I have heard from other parents as well as our own story. I know that, my wife and I argued a lot during her treatment, diagnosis, and things. Like I said, I was away for any inpatient stays, and she would, do her doctor visits and things like that. And I was working full time at this point. I mean, I took time off when we were in the hospital. And I have a temper. I know that I do. It is what it is. And apparently that came out more and I was a shorter fuse during all of that time. And I never saw it as far as like it getting to the point of us not being together, but I definitely saw, a rip in the fabric and not knowing what was going to happen at the end of the day. I've had, other families ask, I don't know what the answer is either. I don't know what kept us together except for our love for our other kids, our love for the responsibilities that we had, the life that we had, and what Jace had done to really bring us together as a family, and how she's done that even after her passing. And aside from that, my parents divorced when I was 6, and I always said, I will absolutely never be in that section. I will never be apart from my family, for my kids. It's not going to happen. My parents were great with us even after being divorced, but I made a promise that would never happen. And that might be part of it. But it's just like, how do you get up and do this every day? How are you so strong? I don't know. We weren't given a choice. Yeah, I'm always looking for that magic answer, right? How do we do it? How do we make it through? And how are we part of the 20%? I don't know. It just kind of is, and you find a groove. But the stress and the mental destruction, I guess you could call it, that you go through with a diagnosis like this, it can affect a lot of your life. And people look at it and see, well, it's just your kid, or it's just your kid, that's where the stress level is. Why would it affect everything else? Because everything is tied to that. Everything is tied to that. I've said it a million times. My children are my greatest achievement in life. I will never achieve anything better than my children, than what my wife and I created. And therefore, they affect everything. They're in the fabric of everything you do. And so if one is sick, or, whatever you're going through, that it leaks out into everything. And, also, my wife and I tell our kids that the key to marriage is tolerance. It's kind of an inside joke. We also say that, we never finish the argument. Whatever we're fighting about, we've been fighting about for 20 years at this point, and once you finish it, then you're done. I guess you've figured it out. So never finish the fight, and tolerance is what you need for a good marriage. And of course, undying love for your partner. And it's a lot to go through something like this, but if you find a way, you find a way. If you don't, you do what's best for your family. But that 80-20 is a huge, huge thing within this community. And 80% is not, again, there's 80% again, right? That's not the section you want to be in.
No. And then we fought like tooth and nail to get where we are today. And I am very proud of us. I mean, I've already been divorced. My parents are divorced. His parents stayed together his whole life, and maybe that's why, But at the same time, I think we also love Edward and William very, very much. We love this life we're building, because I say building because I'm just now trying to start a new career. And he's always been super supportive of me, and I think it was maybe more me because I have a hard time with commitment, and I'm not afraid to say that anymore. That took lots of therapy to say. But, I am my father's daughter, and that's okay. But I've worked through a lot of my issues with that. And, I went to therapy. I did all the work I needed to do, and I still struggle with my anxiety and depression. And I think I always will. But Stephen being more patient and understanding and helpful has been tenfold amazing. And he's always been a great dad, but he's been an even more amazing partner, especially in the past like year and a half.
And that's great. And if you find that, you hold on to it and you never let it go. And I guess the whole purpose of this is that we understand that life can get really, really hard and it can get really tough, and you are tired. There is exhausted, and then there is tired from all of this, from this journey or shit show, as my wife will call it. When you're going through it, you are exhausted. And when I say exhausted and tired, I mean like 48 hours without sleeping, when your child is on, steroids and other drugs that don't allow them to sleep, and they're up all the time. They don't understand why they're up. They don't understand why they're feeling this way. You're up too, and tensions get high. And when you get tired, things also get said and done. Just appreciate what you have, appreciate your surroundings, but you're always going to do what's right. And the best thing we can do is be there for our kids and our family, and hope that you come out on the other side of that in that 20%. But if not, I know the parents that have been in the other side of it still very much are there for their children, and they're very much doing what they have to do to ensure that this fight continues every single day. So now my chair is slipping. I will switch gears again and ask. So you mentioned now that you have Willie and you have Edward. So tell us about them a little bit more. So, and how is the dynamic of sibling relationship with this? Because I know this also affects siblings in a way different way than it does parents.
So Edward is 7. He's in 2nd grade. He's pretty emotional. He's my emotional little boy. He has struggled with this a lot, to be honest, especially this time around, because the first time when they told me to plan William's funeral and he was in the picture, I unfortunately had to call him and tell him that. And he didn't understand. So he was with his dad at the time, had to explain it to him. And then when William was re-diagnosed, I had to tell him. And he had a really tough time. As I said, he said, "Mommy, you can't just send me to..." He calls my ex-husband's parents Nana and Papa. "You can't just send me a Nana and Papa. I want to stay with you. Like, I want to be around you while this is happening." And I said, "Okay. We will try to make sure that happens as much as possible." And we did. I think the one time William was in the hospital for more than a couple of days, he was actually at his dad's, so it was a blessing in disguise. But, this time was a little shorter than last time, and he's had a really tough time. And emotionally, I still think he's having a really tough time, but he loves William. William loves him. I like to call them my feral children because literally they're feral. They're in here fighting and throwing stuff at each other and torturing our poor puppy. But I mean, they really love each other and they're just so attached at the hip, and they play games together, even if they're fighting. Like, it's about, like, "It's my turn to play the game," or "I want to go to bed," or William is sleeping in bed with Edward because they have bunk bed. So William is up in Edward's bed and they're like snuggled together. So like, you see how much they love each other. But I know that William is very brush it off, "I don't care. It is what it is" type of kiddo. He's like his dad in that way. But Edward is very much like me, and he's emotional and he carries everything on his shoulders. Very much the older child. But I know that he loves his little brother, and although it's been very tough on him, we try to get him through it the best we can. And I mean, we've talked about putting them in therapy. I just don't know how beneficial it would be yet. But I did tell Steven, I said, if it happens again, we're going to have to. Because I don't know if Edward will. I need Edward to emotionally survive if anything happened to William. Oh, therapy is absolutely 100% on our radar for him. And for me again. And I mean, as a family, we probably need to go, right? Because it's all been we've been exposed to some stuff I don't wish on my worst enemy. But, I mean, they're still kids. They still act like kids. They still play like kids. I mean, William, you can't even tell that he had his lower lobe of his lung removed. He just runs around and plays like he just doesn't care. And I love that. I love that he still can be a kid. And I love that they still act like kids.
And it is so important that we provide and that they have that normalcy, that life is different, but you're still the same kid you were. And so that normalcy of having, having going to school, if you're able to go to school, or having a sibling that can basically treat them like, the same kid that they were, the same annoying little brother that they were prior to all this happening. And it's a real thing, like I said, we've got 2 older daughters, and JC was attached to them. They both had different avenues of the way that they connected with her. And it was that something that she needed and something that they needed to provide that sense of normalcy, to provide something that we as parents can't provide to them. And that they truly, they handle and deal with things differently. When JC passed, our older children didn't talk to us about that. They talked to their friends because that's how they related, and that's fine. But they definitely handle this differently, and siblings get a lot more attention now in our community, and they should, because they are dealing with it just like their sibling is dealing with it, just obviously in a more emotional state, and having to really think about that reality of, if I lose my sister or brother, how is life going to be after this? How am I going to move forward? And they're dealing with that. They're thinking about these things. So having that there to keep them honest, honestly, is really a cool aspect that I think maybe we don't think about enough. But you have a brother. I mean, I have a sister, and she's 6 years younger than me, and we hated each other in a sense of, we're at each other's throats growing up, until I moved out of my house when I turned 18. Then we became really a lot closer, and we, now we're a lot closer than we were before. It's like you age into that, but you're supposed to be your brother and sister. You're supposed to annoy each other. That's part of the rule book, and you don't ever want to take that away. And so it's really cool to have that support system there for you, because that friends are going to come and go. Your siblings aren't going anywhere. They're there for you no matter what, and they will be your best friends.
Yeah. And that's one thing I tell the boys. I'm like, that's your built-in best friend right there, because I still call him my brother, and we talk trash to each other about football all football season, even though both of our teams suck. That's fine, and we make fun of each other. But at the end of the day, if I need something or someone to call and cry to, it's him. It's him, and we're only 2 years apart, and we've been through the ringer together. But if I needed somebody to call and cry to, or somebody to run to, it will always be my brother. And I tell Everett all the time, that's your brother, no matter what. Willie's, that's it. I'm not having any more kids, so that's your brother. And I know you love him, but I know he's annoying, because he's loud and he has ADHD and he's running around everywhere and can't hear nothing. But you gotta love him, because there was a point, and I'm always very honest with both of them. There was a point when I didn't think he was gonna come home. So we're very lucky that we get to listen to him scream every single word he says, and laugh and throw temper tantrums, because I didn't know if that was gonna be a thing.
Yeah.
So
being able to appreciate that is something that a lot of people take for granted, whether it's a loud kid or whether it's whatever is going on. If you don't appreciate that stuff, the light shouldn't shine then, because these are things that you're missing out on. And taking that for granted can really dampen things. I mean, listen, my cell phone ringtone is JC laughing. And so sometimes if I don't answer the phone the first time, it's because we're just letting it play, so that we can listen to it. And I've also had it ring when I'm in the garage by myself, and it scares the hell out of me, and I run inside the house. So, and I'm pretty sure that happened for a reason. But you don't ever take for granted the time that you have, whether it's your sibling, whether it's your child. Don't take for granted the time that you have. Say yes a lot more. Put the phone down, and have family dinners together, whatever. Just enjoy the time that you have, because it's not that it could end, but it could definitely change in an instant, and you never know how or when or why. And there is no real reasons. We hit on it before with predispositions to certain types of things. for JC's type of cancer, it was gene mutations, a T53 gene mutation. She did not have that. She did not have any type of the two types of factors that could have caused it. So you never know. So don't take for granted the time that you have and spend that very wisely. So we've covered a lot of stuff here, and it was really great. And honestly, whenever I do these episodes, I feel like they could be 3 or 4 hours, and we could just keep talking about it because there's so much. But I want to kind of give you this option give you this opportunity. I always ask when we get closer to the end of an episode, I always ask to give advice. As parents going through this, we garner a lot of advice ourselves. A lot of it is unwarranted that we don't want, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to kind of share with parents that are going through this, or share with parents that may go through this. What is your advice to this community? What is your advice to other parents? And, how do they go about their day-to-day? But as a parent that's experienced it, what would you say to them?
I would say ask as many questions as you can. Find out all the information you can. Reach out to your family members. I am preaching to the choir, calling the kettle black, because I don't do that. Reach out to your family members. Reach out to your friends. Tell them you need help. Tell them you need someone to talk to. Tell them, I just need you to come sit with me for 5 minutes while I give this med to my kid. I need you to come hold my hand while I go to this doctor's appointment with my child. I need you to come to scans with me. You gotta tell people what you want, because a lot of people assume things, but they don't want to assume because it's a hard journey. And none of us should have to do this alone. None of us should have to go to scans alone. None of us should have to hear bad news alone. But you gotta ask your friends and family for the help that you think you need, because most of the time they're not gonna give it unless you ask for it.
Very, very, very true. It's, again, you mentioned it, and I'll mention it too. In this part of my life and everything we've been through, I still have a hard time asking for help. And it is okay. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for help. As a matter of fact, it's a sign of strength, because you know that other people can provide you something that right now you can't provide for yourself, or because you just are stretched way too thin. If someone says, "What can I do?" 99 times out of 100, my answer is, I don't know, or nothing. But the reality of it is, listen, if you're sitting at home with your child and you can't leave and you've run out of milk, hey, can you go to the store and bring this to me? People are going to do that because it makes them feel good about themselves. It gives you a little bit of relief, and, take that option. So my advice is going to be to the parents, to the moms and the dads. This is what I call the oxygen mask theory. You have got to take care of yourself before you can take care of somebody else. If you're not okay, you will not be okay for your child, for your fighter, for your warrior. You will not be okay for them. It is okay to step outside. It is okay to take a walk. It is okay to go on a date. It is okay to laugh and smile. Take care of yourself and ensure that you're okay mentally and physically, emotionally, so that you can be there for your kid in the best way possible. It's okay to ask friends to come and sit with your children while you take a walk. Whatever you've got to do. But if you let it build up to the point where you are begging for help versus asking, it's not going to be as beneficial, and it's got way more chance of it going the wrong way. So my advice, take care of yourself. Be good to you, because if you're okay, they'll be okay. If you're not, it's going to transfer. So is there anything else that you would like to share or you'd like to say in this episode? It has been fantastic, and I love hearing about, I think the sibling stuff is it makes me the most happy, because when they have that best friend, I love hearing that. I also love to hear that, our kids, even going through this, can be pains in the ass, and that's okay,
Always.
It's like, yeah, don't take it for granted. I mean, you want to yell and scream and ground them, but you know what? It's okay, because then they're being kids, and that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Yep, absolutely.
But is there anything else that you would like to share with us about Willie, or about your family, or anything like that?
Oh, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
Awesome. Well, it was an extremely good conversation, and a lot of things, once again, have lined up, especially with not only our family diagnosis leading up to it, but a lot of what we've heard. And that just shows you how common things are that are not right and what we should be working to fix. So at the posting of this episode, it will not be September anymore, but just continue. Gold doesn't stop. Okay. Continue to do things to support our families, to support our communities. We're not asking you to do it for us personally. We're asking you to do it for the entire community, the entire country, the world, of all the children that will fight this. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today and sharing your story. We look forward to hearing more about Willie and his success moving forward. Your success becoming a nurse, that is an amazing thing to be very, very proud of. I know he will be proud of you. I know we are, because that is awesome. So once again, absolutely. It was my pleasure. So Alex, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you.
And we will see everybody else next week.